Hello, 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 and welcome to the highly anticipated episode on the Stanley Cup controversy. Riker is here front and center, as he always is, ready to dive into this topic because I haven't shared any of the information that I'm about to share with you with him. So he's hearing this for the first time as well. So buckle up because we're about to dive into all things the Stanley Quencher Cup. Before we get there, you know that I always love to share where we're going with this, right? So, what we're going to cover today in this episode is really what the deal is, right? Like, what is the issue with the Stanley Quencher Cup? What's Stanley's response? The impact of lead, because the issue is lead exposure. So, the impact of lead on the body in both children and adults. We're going to talk about why lead is used in these cups. I'm going to share companies that are not using lead and what they're using instead. And we're really going to talk about how you can process this whole issue and move forward with it and, choose to take what you want and leave what you don't and move forward, just being more well-informed overall. So that is, in a nutshell, where we're going today. But I want to preface this whole conversation with really how this came about for me, because to be quite honest, I didn't know about this issue until last week. I'm recording this on a Sunday, and this episode will go live tomorrow on a Monday. And I didn't know about this whole issue until late last week. I believe it was Thursday. And I was actually just quickly scrolling through social media. Specifically, I was on Instagram, and one of my girls, one of my OGs, Angie Lee, was talking about this issue. And, she's, if you know her, you know that she's very much into health and wellness, but she's also really diving into her comedy, and just her natural ability to make people laugh. And so I wasn't sure whether to believe it or not, right? To whether she was telling us what was really happening or not. So I decided to further investigate, and that's where I really found, like, holy crap, this is real. This is real, like a real concern for people. So I did what anyone would naturally do. I went down that rabbit hole and I found information all over the place on this. So I'm here to bring all of that information to you so that you can make an informed decision on whether you want to continue to use your Stanley Cup, or maybe you want to look into an alternative. So we're gonna talk about that. So what is the deal then, right? What is the deal with the Stanley Cup? So this actually originates back almost a year ago to the day in 2023. So March of 2023, there was a lead activist that I'm not going to share her name, but there was a lead activist. If you want to do the research, you can find her online, that actually tested a broken Stanley Cup and found that it tested positive for lead. Okay. Since then, many individuals, many of which are on TikTok, influencers, have been testing, here's mine, have been testing their Stanley Cup for lead. Now, what we know right now, as a collective society, is that non-damaged cups are not testing positive for lead. It's those that are damaged, and we'll talk about where typically they're being damaged, that is causing this lead exposure here in a moment. But what we're finding is that cups that are not damaged don't pose an imminent threat to us. Those that are damaged do pose more of a threat to our overall health. So TikTok influencers have gone onto social media and have shared that they are testing their cups for lead exposure. And so what that looks like, if you've seen any of these on TikTok or any other social media platform, they are using a test kit that you can, buy on Amazon, that just swabs either the inside or the outside of the cup. You decide where you want to swab it, but it swabs, you take a swab of the area you want to test, and it will stay orange if it is not positive, and it will turn to purple if it does test positive for lead exposure. So Many of the social media influencers that have done this, the one I just recently watched, I don't remember her name, but it's not important. She swabbed both the inside of her cup and she swabbed the bottom. Right here is the where the lead is said to be housed inside the cup. It's fully protected and covered and on the inside and the out. But this circle right here is where supposedly the lead is. And so many influencers have been testing that to see if it comes back for lead exposure. Now, in their non-damaged cups, it's showing that there is no sign of lead exposure, which is good, right? So why should we be concerned? Well, we don't want to have any lead, right? Like lead is not something we want to be in anything that we're using to consume liquids or beverages. And so what Stanley's saying in response to these claims, in response to, the tests that people have been showcasing and that you can't deny, is that they will replace. Stanley's saying that they will replace any cups that the bottom has been damaged in any way, shape, or form, right? So they're saying that the base layer is covered by a lifetime guarantee. So they will provide a replacement if the cup is damaged. Now, you got to take that up with them, first and foremost. Like, I'm just telling you that if you have a damaged cup, that they're claiming they will replace it as part of this lifetime guarantee of the base layer. But how that becomes damaged and, whether you got the cup and it was damaged or whether you accidentally damaged it, that's a whole nother can of worms, right? You have to go directly to Stanley and see what their response is to your claims. So that's Stanley's response. Now, let's talk about the impact for us as the consumer, right? As the individuals drinking out of this cup. And now Riker is standing right next to the Stanley. He's just doing his own thing because he's done with this conversation. But what lead has in terms of impact on our body is pretty significant. So when we look at the exposure to children, it can over time, constantly being exposed to lead can lower IQ, can damage the brain and the nervous system, can lead to learning and behavioral difficulties, slowed growth, hearing problems, and even headaches. With adults, we can see things like reproductive problems, both in men and women. It can lead to high blood pressure and hypertension. It's also connected with nerve disorders, memory and concentration problems, and even muscle and joint pain. So, I mean, these things are real. These are research backed, claims to what lead can do to our body, both in the short and long term. So our next natural inclination is to ask, well, why are companies using lead in their water bottles, in their cups, in their tumblers? Like, why? Why are we doing this, right? And the short of it all is to keep liquids hotter or colder longer. It's an easy way, it's a cheap way for companies to keep the liquids that you want to put in them hotter or colder, depending on which one you choose, for a longer period of time. Okay, it's as simple as that. So then the next question we beg to answer is, well, if not all companies are using lead to do this, right, to keep liquids cooler or hotter for longer, what are they using, right? So I did the research and looked into that. And what it turns out to be is that most companies that are lead-free are using lead-free glass beads, okay, to help keep liquids cooler or hotter for longer. And they're applying more complex vacuum sealed technology to also help insulate the cup or the tumbler, better so that it will keep that liquid warmer or colder for longer. Now, the cost for companies to do this is really not super super expensive. In my research, it says on average, this process of using these lead-free glass beads and using more complex vacuum sealed technology really only increases the price of the cup by 20 cents. So, I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer. Let's make the health of the cup, thus the health for the consumer, better by doing better with the production and the creation of these products, right? It seems like a no-brainer to me. I'd be willing to pay 20 extra cents for a cup that I know doesn't contain any lead. That's just me. The health advocate in me would say, yeah, I'm all for paying 20 extra cents by all means. That is not going to break the bank for me. Now, if you're wondering what companies are truly choosing to go down this path of not using lead, some of those would be things like Clean Canteen, Hydro Flask, and Owala. Okay. Yeti, Corksicle, and Camelback do contain lead that is sealed. And we know that Camelback also has some plastic cups and bottles as well. But these companies, so Yeti, Corksicle, and Camelback, do contain lead. So if you are thinking of going down that route and purchasing one of those instead of a Stanley, you may come across the same type of concern, the same issue, right? So my suggestion would be to go to one of those other companies, maybe Clean Canteen, Hydro Flask, or Owala. I will say that the link I'm going to share with you in the show notes is going to be for the Owala 40-ounce tumbler. It looks exactly like the Stanley, and it's completely free of lead. It's completely lead-free. So my suggestion would be you think about how you want to move forward with this. If you have a Stanley that is not damaged, then it doesn't really pose an imminent threat to you at this point in time. But what you might want to do is, in the meantime, while your Stanley is still fine and dandy, you might want to look into some of these other companies that do produce cups, bottles, tumblers that are lead-free. And you may want to get a second cup, tumbler, bottle that, in due time, you maybe transition over to, right? So that's my thought on this whole Stanley Cup dilemma, the Stanley Quencher. Like I said, am I going to still use mine? Yes, but am I also going to invest in a lead-free option too? Yep. And in due time, am I going to transition over to that tumbler instead? You betcha. Just because the health advocate in me, the health conscious individual in me wants to make sure that I am not putting myself in any potential way of harm, whether it be through potentially coming in contact with lead through my cup, from it, God forbid, being damaged down the road, to just me knowing who I am and knowing that now that I know what I know, it's kind of hard to come back from that, right? It's kind of hard to be like, how can I justify continuing to drink out of a cup that I know has the potential to leach lead at a given point when I could go for an alternative that doesn't have any of those harms associated with it. So that is that. Again, I will put the link to the Owala 40-ounce tumbler that looks exactly like this and has some really cute colors, and is comparable in price too. I think it's actually cheaper than what I paid for this. So yeah, I will put all that in the show notes. If you have any questions on this, shoot me a DM on Instagram. Let me know, what your thoughts are on this episode. Let me know what you plan to do. If you've got a Stanley, are you going to move forward with an alternative, or are you going to stick with your Stanley for a while? I would love to know how you plan on moving forward with this information that I have provided. So yeah, until next time, I hope you have an absolutely wonderful week, and I will chat with you soon.